we've done a lot of bragging over the last few years about how much our home state of Iowa has gone red and really led the fight on a lot of these culture war issues over the last few years, including earlier this year, we became the first state in the country to take all the gender insanity stuff completely out of its code, out of its civil rights language, just completely plucked it out and threw it into the ash heap of history where it belongs, if not a toilet. All right. So our state now is kind of at a vortex of now the next iteration of the right. And there's a playbook of the right that kind of predates the last decade that essentially says we have to kind of do whatever the corporations want in exchange for permission, basically, to have the conservative cultural issues that we want to have. And what we've seen in that agreement, by the way, worked for a generation, because almost all of the rot gut in the culture that we were fighting on the social conservative side was coming from the public sector, the schools, the universities, government promotion, coercion, etc. But what's happened in the last decade or so is there's been a massive political realignment in America, but it's been in the boardrooms of America. And if in the 90s and 2000s, corporations essentially were neutral on these kinds of issues, gave to groups like the Family Leader and then groups that are also for gay marriage in order to say, hey, we're not in your fight. We love everybody, whatever side you're on, we want your business, etc. They have now, by and large, corporate America has taken a side here and is now every bit the benefactor of the Mish Havisham of woke cultural rot gut as government is. And so we're now seeing this paradigm shift take place on the right as well, where a new generation is coming forth and saying, hey, before we do any more public-private partnerships, before we offer any incentives, and hey, we love jobs and economic development too, but at what cost? Right? If a company was going to come into your state and say, hey, we want to come into your state, but you have to let us, just take all of our waste and just dump it right, into the local sewer system where your kids drink the water, we'd say no. Well, what about cultural pollution? And so this has created some interesting conversations over the last couple of weeks, because one of these bills is being hotly debated in our state right now. Bob Vanderplot's good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing really well.
And as far as I know, I think this might be the first time your organization has taken a position on an issue that I think most people view it as outside of your lane, an economic development issue. But given the changes on the ground in the culture that I just described, where if we're now going to trace the source of where a lot of these pathologies and ideologies we're fighting in the culture are being supported and promoted from, it's coming sadly from the private sector. And so therefore, we want to conserve resources in a state, right? The most precious resource we have is our own families, right? Okay. Yeah. So families need jobs. We all agree to that too, right? Okay. So what's the economic, what kind of, mammon ratio are we going for here in exchange for Sodom and Gomorrah, basically?
So basically, Steve, what they're doing is they're making us play. We used to say, you will be made to care. Now they're kind of making us play. They're forcing our hand to play. And although our mission is that if it's for the family, we will be for it. If it's against the family, we're going to be against it. And whether that's economic policy or social policy or international policy, whatever the policy might be, if it benefits the family, we're going to be for it. And Steve, you're right to say, under Governor Reynolds' leadership and with this legislature, it's been pinch yourself stuff that we have taken a lot of ground under her leadership. You talk about the heartbeat bill. You talk about the school choice bill, the religious liberty bill, removing this gender nonsense out of the Iowa code, banning surgeries for minors. You can't mutilate the kids here in Iowa. All the stuff we applaud. Matter of fact, Steve, I could probably take the rest of the show here today to just applaud Governor Reynolds and her leadership and this legislator's leadership. And the Iowa electorate, they have rewarded them with landslide victories. Remember the red wave that was supposed to happen in 2022? And there's really only a couple of states where it happened, Florida and Iowa. Mm-hmm. We experienced a red wave. Iowans have rewarded that type of leadership. Well, now there's a bill in it's a companion bill, so it's in the Senate and in the House, but basically granting ROFR status, which is right of first refusal status, to a couple of electrical companies for our electrical needs here in the state of Iowa. And so, because I used to teach economics, I'm always concerned about ROFR anyhow, because it eliminates competition. But we said, okay, reasonable minds can disagree what's in the best economic interest for the state of Iowa. However, when you take a deeper dive into the companies that you are granting special interest to, special status to, giving them this privilege, and all of a sudden they're the ones who are championing drag queen story hours for the kids, or face painting, for what they call it, face painting to celebrate queer happiness with the kids. Well, to me, it's a little bit like the book of Ezekiel. If you know this is happening, if you say nothing, it's on your hands.
The watchman on the wall, yeah.
But if you know it and you at least alert them, and that's what we're doing is for the family. That's why we decided to engage in this fight, is to alert Governor Reynolds, to alert the Iowa legislature. Hey, listen what you're doing. If you're going to go with this ROFR deal, these two companies, they're out loud and proud and they're doing everything DEI, ESG, woke, everything, which is a cultural decay to our society here in the state of Iowa. So we're taking a stand against it. And this is one of the very few times, probably the only time, where Governor Reynolds and I have been on the opposite side. And it's not the opposite. I don't say her and I are not against each other. These companies are forcing our hand here. Because I can see from her perch as governor why she may want to do this, because it's in the best economic interest in the state of Iowa. But I believe also from our perch, we have a responsibility to call this out. And so we're calling it out.
Is it possible in individual states, amendments, riders could be put on bills, some form of yearly accountability subcommittees that these corporations have to, come before and have their policies and practices vetted, by the duly elected legislature on behalf of the people? Hey, are you promoting this rot gut? Are you funding these kinds of things? That is there a way to do some of that so we don't necessarily have to throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Well, there definitely is. As a matter of fact, we do have that when it comes to abortion already, that, there's an amendment that says, but these funds will go to women's health and all things women's health services, but not to abortion providers. You could have a pro-family amendment that would pass, I'll say, the DEI muster, all whatever muster you say, I want to make sure we protect our kids against this stuff. You could have a pro-family amendment that would get placed on that. That was going to take smarter people to craft than me, but there is a way to do that, to offer an amendment like that.
What's fascinating about this, too, is I mentioned at the top, and we've talked about this before, and that states like Iowa have led the way on a lot of these fights. In this case, D.C. is actually leading the way.
Yeah.
This is a case where President Trump and his administration have, from day one, been aggressive against this. Several major corporations, even before he got elected, took them seriously and started abandoning their own woke ideologies, departments, and things of that nature.
And frankly, Steve, I think what it is, there's a lot of corporations in America today. They don't want to be involved in this stuff. They want a way out. Trump gives them cover, we get out. Here's the thing. If you're up for a ROFR agreement in the state of Iowa, especially one that's going to be worth $1 billion or more dollars, I would think Iowa's got a strong hand here to say, how do you play with us?
Right. We're the ones giving you the resources. And by the way, this conversation could be applied in every single red state in America.
Oh, exactly.
If you don't need the resources, why are you coming to us for them in the first place, right?
And what Trump just showed, this would be a number 2 that I wanted to talk to you about, in a red state, even in a blue state. The state of Maine, where he's at odds with the governor in Maine on the Safe Girls Sports, a new poll shows 64% of the people in Maine side with the president. The people, I don't care if you're red or blue state, they're tired of this type of garbage taking place.
Speaking of confronting blue states, Aaron, you throw that graphic up for just a second. This is a note Secretary of Education Linda McMahon has sent to the state of California. If you're listening on podcast, I'll read it for you. Ultimately, this comes down to, this is the conclusion of the note. Ultimately, this comes down to parents' fundamental rights to raise their own children. When we entrust our children to a school, we want to know that the school is committed to educating them on critical subjects, not exposing them to books and classroom discussions that suggest they can choose or change their sex. It isn't prejudicial or bigoted to expect teachers to acknowledge the reality of sex and help youngsters understand that no one is born in the wrong body.
Amen.
As Secretary of Education, I am officially asking you to inform this department whether you will remind schools in California to comply with federal law by protecting sex-separated spaces and activities. I am also officially asking you to publicly assure parents that California teachers will not facilitate the fantasy of gender transitions for their children. By doing so, you can ensure that schools will not continue to harm students by facilitating the false beliefs that sex is mutable and dependent on inner feelings or stereotypes. California's education system should not be a vehicle for extreme ideologies, but should refocus on its educational mission. I thank you for your kind attention in the matter. I will await your prompt response regarding your intention to address it. And again, that is the conclusion of a letter just sent by Secretary of Education Linda McMahon to the state of California.
You know, as a former educator, when I saw that Trump nominated Linda McMahon to be Secretary of Education, I really didn't know what to think. You know, does she have all I knew is that if her task was to eliminate the Department of Education at the federal level, I was all in favor of it. But when I read that note that she sent to Governor Newsom, that's a note the family leader could have wrote. That's basically Deuteronomy 6 stuff. The parents raise the children. The government doesn't raise the children. We expect you to be excellent in teaching our kids the academics. This is a lot of the teachers that I don't care where you go in the state of Iowa or across the country, a lot of the teachers saying, just let me teach. I'm sick of all this other garbage you're making me do. And she's basically saying that to Governor Newsom, saying a boy's a boy, a girl's a girl. Stop this fantasy that they should be changing their sexes, that they're born in the wrong body. We should be applauding that type of leadership. But again, I think it shows the cultural narrative. And that's why when you take a look at Governor Reynolds and her exemplary leadership, the state of Iowa's legislature and their exemplary leadership on this issue, it would only follow suit that they follow through now on if they're going to do an economic package with a ROFR in it for companies to say, clean up your act, and then we can move this thing forward.
And I think that this is a conversation that every single state legislature ought to be having, particularly red ones. I think, you know, and these kinds of, maybe uncomfortable isn't the right word. How about disruptive? Because you are seeing some coalitions and relationships that have worked together very closely on several subjects now, having different takes and perspectives on this. I think that's indicative of whenever there is a generational paradigm shift.
Sure.
And if we were having this conversation in 1985, 1995, probably even 2005, I don't foresee an organization like yours would have a take on this. It's very clear that the major origin points, inflection points of the cultural pathologies and ideologies you're confronting are coming from the state, the universities, the government schools, for example, government incentive and coercion. But it's not 1985, 95, or 2005. And it's very clear in this era, okay, that at the very least, the private sector rivals the public for its promotion and subsidizing of these pathologies and ideologies, if not has taken the lead, or at the very least is even more influential because these brand names like John Deere with its DEI programs, John Deere's brand name is way more trusted than United States government. Okay, and so even if government is still by and large predisposed to give more money to these efforts, it doesn't have the credibility that these venerable American companies do, and so their ability to influence the cultural zeitgeist exceeds government in these cases. And so we're just going to have to wake up to this. And there is a ratio. There is an amount of money that is too much for your own soul. There just is. And I don't know necessarily what that amount is. I'm not God. It's not for me to determine that. I just think it's a conversation that needs to be had, and people need to come down and reason together about that.
And especially when your kids are in the vortex. And again, I taught economics, and in economics, when you studied the stock market, you were looking for companies that made money, that were profitable, that showed good business practices, they had a good product that would shape the vision of the new era of America, so to speak. But now there's a lot of these investment companies where their number one thing is not profit, it's social justice.
Exactly.
It's changing the way you operate as a culture. Yep. And that's why it behooves a state legislature and a governor and others in authority to make sure you put parameters, especially when you're granting special privilege or exclusivity.
Todd and Aaron, you have any thoughts on this?
I'm just gonna remind everybody of what I've said in the past. Economy. It's from the Greek economia. household. That's what this is about. And we need to make the family leaders' message clear. We never, ever, ever sacrifice on that. Don't make the Scott Walker mistake, a guy who we thought had understood that, but it's clear he just liked a clean spreadsheet. When he went after the public sector unions, we thought he was making a broader moral statement. He wasn't. He forgot about where economia comes from. We will never, ever, ever sacrifice the household, because if we do, none of this is worth fighting for.
It's not 2005 anymore. Okay? the notion I'm fiscally conservative, socially liberal. No. These things are intrinsically connected. You cannot separate these notions. And so my fear here, it sounds like, my fear in going down roads like this is that we're kind of succumbing to that, it's really a hoax. You just cannot separate fiscal and social conservatism at all, whatever conservatism is anymore. You just cannot do that. And my fear is that maybe this is happening right now. So don't fall for that canard. We cannot do that. There is one way through, and that is the pursuit of truth. And I've seen these arguments so many times. It's 2025. The people, I think, by and large, have spoken. They are over the woke garbage in whatever form it comes, whether that's from your school or whether that's coming from a major corporation. They're over it. It would be a fool's errand to try to cozy up to corporations at this juncture.
And Steve, probably for me, and that's well said, both Todd and Aaron, but for me, this is a great opportunity to take a page out of Governor Ron DeSantis' playbook, taking on Disney. If you're going to have a special privilege here in the state of Florida, let's talk about what you're doing to the children. And to Aaron's point, you can't have a thriving economy as long as...
How's Florida's economy doing?
Very well.
Seems to be doing okay.
You can't have a thriving economy as long as you keep busting up the families and teaching rot gut to the kids. Those correlations will never work. It is a correlated matter. It always has been a correlated matter. We're just starting to wake up to it. And you have guys like President Trump, Vivek, Elon, Governor DeSantis, exposing all of this.